I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
Marc Lore sold diapers.com to Amazon for $575 million. Then he started a new e-commerce site to compete with Amazon called jet.com, and then he sold that for over $3 billion to Walmart. He recently left Walmart, and now the guy is starting so many different things, it's hard to keep track. He wants to create a completely unique, built, self-sustained city. So we talk about this. It's a new concept of building his own city, and you'll hear his thoughts on that. He's invested in a flying cars startup, and the technology is closer than I thought with that. He bought the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I have some questions about that led to some ideas for me about startups I could do. He also started a new company called Wonder, which is like the next step ahead of Uber Eats. And I also got some ideas when I heard him talk about this. So listen up, and here he is. So Marc, lots of things to talk about. I'll jump right into it. First, obviously, the city concept is fascinating. Telosa is your idea of building a completely unique kind of self-sustainable city. Do you want to describe this a little, why you wanted to do it? And then I have a ton of questions.
Yeah, sure. So it wasn't one day that I just woke up and said, I think it would be cool to build a city. It was never from the beginning any sort of like a real estate project or it'd be cool to build a city. It really started with this problem that, I think everyone's pretty familiar with in America, which is the divide between equality is getting worse than it ever has been. And just felt like, do we have capitalism right? And started thinking about it. And I read this book, Progress and Poverty by Henry George, a late 19th century economist. Yes. And I was just fascinated. I was struck by it. It really hit a chord with me. If you think about capitalism, I think it's a great economic model, but it needs to have some guardrails. You saw what happened, before we had antitrust laws against monopolies. Capitalism and monopolies don't work well together. Workers suffered big time.
Marc, can I ask about that?
Yeah,
obviously, you can view Amazon.com right now as an e-commerce sort of monopoly, even though you have a great experience, so you're the person to talk to. Jet.com was able to start by you and compete enough to be, noticed by a Walmart, and essentially, became Walmart's e-commerce arm. So do you feel in today's society, innovation and technology moves so fast that monopolies could be undercut?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you only need one other company to compete, and be a formidable competitor for it not to be a monopoly. I think you've got that in Walmart. So I don't think workers, have only one option. If they're working in the fulfillment centers there at Amazon and they're not happy or not feeling like they're getting paid fair wages, they can go work at Walmart. Like that wasn't the case back, in the 1800s before we had antitrust and there were true monopolies where you really only had one place to work. The world wasn't as mobile as it is today, and you lived where you worked, and there was one company that dominated, and basically you had no choice.
So are monopolies, like if monopoly is an underpinning of what you're looking at economically, is the danger of monopolies in a capitalist society as great as they were 100 years ago?
The danger is still there, absolutely, but we have antitrust laws now that will break companies up and prevent monopolies from forming. So my point really was that without that sort of guardrail, capitalism wouldn't be a great economic model. It is because the guardrails that we put in place around it to encourage competition. One of the things that struck me reading that book was this idea of land ownership and how there's a finite amount of land, and landowners essentially have sort of this silent monopoly over the property that they own. And really without putting any work in, without taking any risk, put any capital at risk or anything like that, land appreciates when communities are formed on the land, when tax dollars are invested in infrastructure to increase the value of the land. And I just fundamentally thought, well, what if it were different? I'm not saying that people shouldn't own land. People should definitely own land. But what if it were different in that if we started when the land was worthless with a community foundation, basically representing the people, owning the land. And when the land increased in value because communities formed and people started their lives there, then that land appreciation would be captured by the foundation. It would create an endowment and then use that money, sort of like a sovereign wealth fund, to basically provide incredible social services for the people that live there, because it's the people that live there that form these communities that gave value to the land. And then once the land appreciation was captured and it was a normal sort of thriving city, that the community foundation would sell off the land. So people would be able to own land, but the community would capture that rapid appreciation that goes from land being worthless to being worth, something, being a thriving city.
It's almost like viewing land as like a startup. So most of the value in a startup happens in those first years where
yes,
economic value is created from an initial idea. And then when it goes public, on average, it'll go 7 or 8% a year. You could sell it off to speculators and so on. Essentially the idea.
That's a great analogy. Absolutely great analogy. In fact, so the land in the desert, like in Nevada, for example, is like $2,000-$3,000 an acre. And if you were able to build a city of 5 million people, and like a legit city, just the day that 5 million people were living there, and it was actually a real city, the land's going to be worth, call it, I don't know, $1 million an acre. So, you know what I mean? Like in the city itself, that land appreciation, which could amount to as much as $1 trillion worth of value created for the community foundation that basically bought this worthless land. Imagine having $1 trillion endowment, earning $50 billion a year to basically give back to the citizens in the form of like incredible education, medical care, affordable housing, basically getting the social services of a socialist democratic country without having to increase taxes. So you have the same sort of tax structure you have today in America that people love relative to social democratic countries, but the same, if not better, social services. So that's what got me really excited. There is a way and a path forward to have both, to have, a more equitable city population, where people have a great foundation without having to charge people 70, 80% marginal tax rates to pay for it. Like this is a great solve. And so that's what really inspired me to want to build the city. And then as we started thinking about, wow, if we're going to build a city from scratch, 5 million people, let's make it the most sustainable city in the world, because we know we can from scratch, and make it run on 100% renewable energy and zero waste, and really kind of like take a leap forward on a sustainability front. How do we use 90% less water than we use today? And there's lots of technologies that exist today that are just not being implemented in cities because the cities already have infrastructure. And it's too expensive to rip it out and put a new infrastructure in. But if you started from scratch, you can do some really cool things.
It reminds me just of how internet infrastructure developed around the world, like places that did not already have good cellular infrastructure, for instance, originally, like let's say South Korea, ended up with much better internet infrastructure because if US can't start from scratch. Our infrastructure was built in the 50s for the telephone network, but a smaller country or a country like South Korea suddenly was able to have 5G without having 3G first. I don't know if that's true, but something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's the same exact analogy. That's perfect. Yeah.
So here's a question I have and I love this idea. So there's a couple questions like just on, it sounds like first you would open it up to a community where the community would equally own the land, or how would an initial ownership work?
Yeah, so we started a community foundation. It's called the Telosa Community Foundation. The foundation is going to get donations and purchase and acquire 200,000 acres of land for, call it $500 million in round numbers. And foundation would encourage real estate investors, builders, people to move there and sort of encourage and help, form the foundation of the city. And if 5 million people move there, like I said, the foundation would have all this land that it would be selling off at a huge premium and create a sovereign city endowment.
And how would the people moving there, how would they make money or accumulate, let's say, wealth or whatever?
Yeah, so there would be jobs. That would be a reason why people would want to move there. They'd move there for the incredible social services, the education, the healthcare, which would be like nowhere else in the U.S. And also the city will be sustainable, have amazing, parks and restaurants. I mean, we're starting with people at the center. So this is not like one of these sort of cities of the future you see where it's all tech driven and seems cold. The city has to have a soul, and it has to have, it has to be a place that people want to live, want to raise a family. That's what we're focused on.
And so a lot of cities, I mean, the history of cities sort of grow organically. Like, let's say a city like New York City starts up and it's a great port for goods coming into the country and goods leaving the country. So people move in and they decide they need a certain kind of food. So they start restaurants or they start grocery stores or they start whatever. It seems to happen organically. How would you be able to know to do the urban planning? Like, okay, now we need this many restaurants, this many laundry services, this many hospitals, and so on.
Yeah, no, it's a really big challenge, and there's a chicken and egg. But cities grow organically because there's like no incentive. There's no sort of big grand opening of a city where people all decide to move there at a single point in time. The way we're going to sort of put this together is because we're able to create what could be $1 trillion endowment for the city. We're going to take some of that money and invest in what any company would do in sort of a B2C marketing campaign, which is to drum up interest from people that want to live here before it's even open, and basically have an opening day of the city. It'll be the first center of the city will be for 50,000 people. And the goal is to have 50,000 people move in on a single day, but maybe over the course of a month, where doctors and teachers show up and then people start layering in. But basically 50,000 people in a very short period of time all move to the city to sort of solve that chicken and egg problem. There needs to be jobs there. So they're the jobs of like restaurants and hotels and all the services, obviously doctors and lawyers and teachers and things. But one of the big driving factors early on is going to be entrepreneurs. So as part of this Telosa Community Foundation, there's going to be a venture arm that's basically going to invest in entrepreneurs that have really cool business ideas that want to basically build their idea in the city of Telosa. So it could be a global business. It could be a tech company. It doesn't have to be specific to the city of Telosa, but simply moving there, getting office space and starting to incubate your startup and hire people is going to be one of the foundational pieces of how we get to 50,000 quickly.
And then how would the city be governed?
Just like any other city, it would have a government. We're going to do our best to try and, make the government more transparent, but we're a community foundation that's sole mission is to increase the value of the fund and give it back to the citizens in the form of great services. So there'll be, just like there would, elected officials in a government, and it would run like any other city, but you would have this other piece called the foundation that would work closely with the government, because the foundation would have so much money that it wants to invest back into the citizens. And it would be a little bit like it is today with the charity sitting with the government and trying to figure out where best to put the funds.
It's so interesting because it goes along, in a weird way, it goes along with what's happened in the past 2 years that we've seen with COVID, where cities have drastically different policies than other cities, and they get to decide about different mandates or what businesses stay open, what businesses get closed. And all of this has been with good intentions in the interest of public health. But it almost makes you wonder, with these self-contained cities, they could control essentially access and what are the policies for public health. And you even have to apply, let's say, to go to a city, or maybe you have to, in the city of the future, you might have to apply to live in a certain city as opposed to just moving there. Do you see something like that related to these concepts, if there's a lot of them?
I mean, I could see that happening somewhere else. And I basically encourage people to test new models. I think we haven't done enough testing around cities in this country. Like, it's been pretty stagnant. Hasn't been a lot of innovation. So I encourage people to try other models. But in this particular case in Telosa, our value is to be open, fair, and inclusive. So by definition, it's not a closed city. It's not, going to be an application. Anybody can move there. It's meant to be fair, equitable, inclusive, and open. It's really, and the only thing I'd say, which is counter to this a little bit, is the first 50,000 people. In order for the city to be truly inclusive and open, it's important to have a diverse group of people that are this first 50,000 to basically get the snowball rolling. And so we are thinking through how we ensure that the first 50,000 are diverse and not a certain homogeneous group of people that gravitate toward it. And so there might be some sort of application process for the first 50,000 just to kick things off, like you would at any university, building a diverse class of students. But that's very complicated. It comes with its own set of issues and things, but it seems better than letting it just go and having it be not diverse and not inclusive from the outset.
It's also really interesting, I'm somewhat familiar with Henry George and his principles about the value of, most of the value of society gets built up by using the land for some real purpose, like whether it's mining resources or building a factory or building companies or building social services, whatever. And this, of course, was in the 1800s. And I'm wondering if the 1900s changes the view a little bit, where land became kind of, let's say, equal in value to good ideas. So you look at Silicon Valley, the value of the land appreciated, but the value of the companies created in Silicon Valley appreciated a lot more. And so I'm wondering if you miss out on some of the other value created in this city when you focus just on the land.
Well, I think that's a really good point. It's something we're thinking through right now. Like, since the Community Foundation of Telosa is kicking off the building of the city, there are opportunities early on for Telosa to, the Community Foundation, to make investments in some startups that could help the city blossom and create incredible equity value too, that accrues back to the citizens. So it doesn't have to be just land. We are looking for other ways to create value. The mission, though, of course, is to try and create value on behalf of the people that live there, so that we can create this incredible virtuous cycle where people trust the foundation who live in the city, and they see all the good that the foundation is doing in terms of education and healthcare and all these amazing things, that people decide in the community to donate to the foundation. So right now, you don't really donate to your city. That's called taxes. People hate that. People donate to schools, they donate to hospitals, but we'd love a world in which they donate to the community in which they live through the foundation, knowing that the foundation is going to make it a higher quality of life for their kids and their grandkids and future generations, that there's that trust there. That's when things really start to look interesting from a new model for society perspective.
The other thing maybe we learned about cities during the past 2 years was that, take a city like New York City, and I had this conversation with Eric Adams, and now he's the mayor of the city. The economic velocity of money in most cities went way down during COVID, obviously, because people didn't leave their homes. So when they made $1 of income, they didn't go down to the local newspaper store or the local deli or the local laundromat. They made $1 and the dollar went to Seattle because they bought diapers off of Amazon, for instance. One idea that I was thinking of, and I wonder if this is relevant, is whether it's a digital currency or however you do it, you create kind of like, let's say in the example of New York City, a New York City dollar, where the way you mine additional dollars is by spending money, New York City dollars in New York City. So you kind of encourages people, sort of becomes a virtuous cycle, encouraging people to buy local. And I wonder if something like that should be put in place in a city like you're describing, so that people don't just move there, but buy everything elsewhere.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. We'll definitely think about that. We're getting ideas like this from smart people like yourself, and we're sort of like just putting them into sort of a holding pen right now to just sort of start going through them and start thinking about whether it makes sense. We're still a long way off like making a decision like that, but that's a great idea and something that we need to consider for sure.
Yeah, because initially, if you don't have that many services other than the great social services, you're going to be competing with remote e-commerce sites for the hard-earned money that arrives in the city, and you'd rather that money stay in. And this is a big source of income inequality now. It's like you go to a low-income neighborhood, the income arrives in the low-income neighborhood, and then it immediately leaves. People buy stuff do their laundry at the laundromat. The people in the laundromat live outside the lower-income neighborhood, and then the money's gone.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I get it.
What would be the incentives for people to initially fund the project? Would it be donations? Why would people donate initially?
Yeah, the foundation, it will be a 501c3, charity. And so, the initial dollars would be people that, like myself, that are going to make, big donations to this to see it happen, to really truly test, is there a better way? And that's really the incentive there.
Is something like this happened before? I mean, there's what is it in Saudi Arabia? Is there the NEOM project?
NEOM, yeah.
Is that off the ground?
They're starting to build it already, but it's a little different in that they're taking a very sort of high-tech angle. It's a little bit different than what we're thinking here, which is testing a new model for society and really starting with people at the center and values about being fair, open, inclusive, and sustainability. It's a little bit different. It is a new city, but I would say more technology focused.
And what's the timeline?
For Telosa?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're saying 2030 is sort of, that gives us about 8 years to sort of get the land, get all the permitting, start putting shovels in the ground and start building and get it up and running where people can start moving in.
Where are you thinking about? Have you identified locations?
There's lots of different places, but I think it has to be somewhere where the land is very cheap and the government is open to us building a city of 5 million people. So when you put it through that lens, it starts to narrow the options. So we're going through a process now. Yeah.
I keep thinking like South Dakota, Montana, Nevada, Wyoming, places like that.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's got to be cheap land, 200,000 acres at a minimum. And we have to, have government support to build a city of 5 million people. So there's not too many places where that is the case. So
what do you think will be the total price tag to at least get the 50,000 in there?
You mean to build the city for 50,000 people and the land? Yeah, about $10 billion.
Okay. All right. So I think the NEOM project is talking in the hundreds of billions.
Yeah. Well, to build the entire city would be hundreds of billions, but sort of to get started, we think, somewhere 10, 12 billion to get started. But again, it wouldn't be, at this point, the Telosa Community Foundation, it would be having, real estate developers and builders and things that would come in and build office space and restaurants and residential and things. And there has to be incentive for them to do it. They have to believe that there's going to be the people there. And so the foundation is really going to be focused on how do we ensure that we've got 50,000 people to move there, to basically incentivize developers to want to build residences for the 50,000 people. And so can they pre-sell? There's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, and that's probably the biggest challenge in this project, but we've been thinking about it a lot. We think we have a good plan to pull that off.
And if, the land is sort of community owned or owned by the foundation, what if some people don't really pull their weight? Is there any dangers in that? Or maybe there's not really a danger in that? I don't know.
No, we're not it's not down to the individual like that. It's the collective. It's the community itself that will benefit. It's the people and citizens that live there that will benefit. With that said, I do think you raise a good point. Should there be? And that's a great question. Should there be some responsibility or accountability of the citizens that live there? That's a whole talk about that for days.
Well, I guess if you tax the land, people have to do things to improve the land. So otherwise you lose your land back to the foundation.
Yeah, well, again, it's no different than any city in America now. Like the land is owned by, real estate developers, families, people own land, and they basically lease the land or build something on the land or sell the land. It's not going to be any different. Like the land owner will be the foundation, but you can lease the land from the foundation and build something. You could lease it for, the land for 50 years or something. Like it's not going to constrain any sort of capitalistic sort of investment in any sort of real estate project.
No, but I mean, if someone's not pulling their weight and they're leasing land, eventually they'll lose the lease if they just are sitting on the land doing nothing and just living off the social services of the city. And I hate to sound like ultra capitalistic with that. That almost sounds like extreme, but I'm just thinking like you're going to have extremes on either end. Like you'll have people who are insanely productive and really drive the value of the city, and you'll have the person who's ranked 50,000th in terms of their ability to improve the value of the land.
Yeah, it raises a great question. These are great debates to have. Our view right now, but it could change, is it's just simply just like it would be in New York City. You pay the real estate, you pay the rent, you pay the real estate taxes, you can live there. Like you don't get kicked out or something, That's how we're thinking about it right now. But it is true that if you're paying real estate and you're paying your taxes, but you're not, pulling your weight, that it's not going to be good for you. You know what I mean?
Right. Eventually things will get bad for you.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's a smaller way to experiment, like buy a small community where the land has some value already, but you have a goal to put more value in there somehow. Like instead of 200,000 acres, 3,000 acres, you buy a development. And so again, there's some value already. It's not $2,000 an acre. It might be $20,000 an acre or $100,000 an acre. But your goal would be to see if you could get this to $500,000 an acre, as building some microcosm of what you're thinking of. Or maybe there's kind of a size that too small is too small.
I think that's what it is. We went through this and down this path that it is, if it's small like that and you are paying sort of fair market value, it's very hard to drive up the price of the land in any meaningful way, because there's a reason why people aren't, like the land is worth what it's worth and people haven't moved there and people already know of the place. It's a little bit, it's different than having it's like a startup going into a startup that's already like 4 years old and they're not like doing well. And you want to sort of come in and make it the next $1 trillion company. It's a lot harder than just saying clean slate, because there's a story to tell. It's it's new. It's in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't exist. There's no way to get to it except flying into the airport or driving, hours. It's literally in the middle of nowhere. It's the marketing story of this being a new way of life, different. Like you got to come see it, and being able to have, iconic buildings and restaurants and nightlife and parks and things that you're really like you can show people and be a reason to come there. If you had some sort of like little edge city that's been floundering for 100 years and to go in there and like buy the land and try and like rip out the infrastructure, and what do you do about all the stuff that's there already that's not, doesn't make sense, or it's not sustainable? Or how do you build a city with all autonomous vehicles? Because one of the things in Telosa is we're really considering is fully autonomous vehicles, which make the roads more narrow, which allows you to have more walkability, more bikeability. You'd have virtually no accidents, especially not car to car. You wouldn't need street lights. You wouldn't need street signs. It'd be cheaper, be more efficient, and safer. And like, how do you do that in an edge city? There's things like that too.
No, and I think that is the future, because look, ultimately all autonomous vehicles work better in an environment like you just said. And how do we do that in the US? We already have all our roads, and they're not made for autonomous vehicles, at least at the moment.
no, people don't fully, I think, appreciate unless you really know autonomous vehicles. It seems like something way out into the future. Like, is that possible? Does that really work? If all the cars were autonomous, it's actually today, it's simple, it's easy. It's one of the easiest problems out there. It's only because having autonomous vehicles with cars on the road and having the roads not built for autonomous vehicles is why there's all this complexity. And even now we're making it work, but starting from scratch is actually a really simple problem.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. You've invested in these vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, like basically flying cars, right? So I'm not that familiar with the company you've invested in, but there's something like 300 of these flying car companies that are VC funded, and that number boggles my mind. Like, where are these cars, and how are they ever going to regulate them? Like, what's going on with this entire industry and with your company?
Yeah, so my company that I invested in is called Archer. It's a public company. And yeah, I mean, we just recently hovered. It's basically like, think about it, it's like a passenger drone. So take a drone and make it big enough for people to sit in. That's sort of what it is. So it can obviously go vertical, just like a drone, and fly and come back down. It's, safer than a helicopter. It's less noisy, and it's much cheaper. There's a lot less moving parts. And I do think that's the future of urban mobility. These are what we call e-VTOLs, electric vertical takeoff and landing. And you said about being, the FAA and stuff like that. If it's piloted, then once the aircraft itself is certified, just the way the FAA certifies airplanes today, if you have a pilot in there, you could fly it. As soon as the aircraft's certified, get a pilot and fly it, like under FAA guidelines today. If you want it to be autonomous, which is certainly the future, that's going to be a lot longer. But they're going to be piloted very soon. Inside of 5 years, we're going to be, able to go out and fly on one of these things.
It's so funny because, like, autonomous vehicles, you read articles about, you see examples. Oh, these so many miles have been driven on the highway and so on. But like in 5 years, will I be able to get in this huge drone in my driveway, take off and like land at the local Walmart, buy some food, take off and come home? Is that what's going to happen?
Inside of 5 years, you will not be able to do that. What you will be able to do is be in New York City and leave from a heliport, maybe a vertiport, that's not where helicopters are leaving from. That's something separate, and be able to go to Kennedy Airport in 15 minutes, as opposed to taking 2 hours by car. So yes, you will be able to do that within 5 years for sure. You will be able to, if you want to fly in one of these e-VTOLs, you'll be able to do it inside of 5 years. For
That's
sure.
amazing. That's amazing. So
For sure.
And
personal in your home, that would be cool, by the way. These things are pretty big. I mean, I can imagine a future where they start getting, tighter and tighter in terms of space. And then one day, if you have a big enough, yard, you could potentially, do that, and there'll be places to land. But I mean, at that point, you're probably 20 years away from something like that. At least
because
20
I
years.
guess the batteries have to be a lot more efficient. Like you have to have really good batteries. So
yeah, I mean, the batteries now, I mean, we're able to go pretty good distance, but it's more just the size of it. If you saw the size of it, it's, they've got, wings. I guess you mean, if the wings are shorter, you need more battery power. So that, to your point, that's the biggest issue.
And so I'm very interested also in your most current startup, Wonder, which sort of you can describe it in a second, but it sort of strikes me as an integration or a hybrid of ghost kitchens, Uber Eats and food trucks, basically.
Yeah, I could see how it appears that way. We don't really like to think of it in terms of like a food truck. It's a fully integrated end-to-end system where we've basically created a platform to create next generation restaurant chains. So we're vertically integrated, and we basically source and prep the food in a central commissary in such a way that it allows somebody with low skilled or low amount of training on a truck to basically be able to cook the food in just a few minutes in a high speed impingement oven right outside somebody's door. But it's sort of an end-to-end system. It's not a food truck. There's no open flame. Everything happens very fast, and a lot of years of R&D has gone into creating the food in such a way, combined with the programming of the oven, to be able to cook, let's say, a Bobby Flay steak in under 5 minutes, piping hot, charred on the outside, like beautiful cut of filet, or being able to cook a pizza perfectly in like 3 minutes. That's like as good as you'd find in the best pizza place you've ever been to. So we've created 17 of these restaurant chains. So if you think about like creating a brick and mortar chain, how challenging it is. You have to find the real estate, you have to build it, you have to hope that you get enough revenue to cover your break even to make a margin. And if you guess wrong, or the wrong location, it doesn't make money, and then you're sort of sunk. Because the platform we created this across these 17 chains is fungible, this truck is fungible across the 17 restaurants. We could basically go into an area, find out what the demand is for every one of these 17 restaurant chains, and then put the right amount of mobile restaurants to satisfy the demand perfectly. And if demand's down, you put a little less. Demand's more, you add a little more. So it's completely fungible. It allows you to scale really fast, but more importantly, match supply and demand perfectly, so you don't have this problem that restaurants have, which is this the right location? So there are a lot of places we can go into now and give access to food that people can't currently get because it doesn't make sense for a brick and mortar. The hurdle rate is too high. You need 3 million in revenue to make this restaurant work. There's not 3 million of demand. That's okay. There's only 500,000 worth of demand. Great. We'll put 2 mobile restaurants in there, and now we satisfy the $500,000 worth of latent demand. So it really allows us to give people access to this incredible food that they can't get access to via restaurants because it doesn't make economic sense. We're also able to cut across, many different chains, everything from steak to pizza to burgers to Chinese to Indian, Thai, Mexican, we can cut across all of them because we have one single fungible tech platform. And that'll also enable us to scale really fast as well.
And will you be able to, will someone who has an idea for a restaurant be able to come to you and say, hey, can I use your infrastructure? And
yeah, exactly. Aspiring chefs, rather than spending $1 million to open a restaurant, if you have a restaurant idea, you basically come up with a menu, get one mobile restaurant, go out on the road. We'll tell you exactly how many orders you'll do in a night based on, we just sort of know based on the algorithms. If that goes well, then you lease another truck, and then a third truck, and a fourth truck, and you have 4 mobile, 5 mobile restaurants, 6 mobile, and you can build your restaurant that way, one piece at a time.
What's the benefit to me as, let's say, someone with a restaurant idea of doing that as opposed to leasing space in a ghost kitchen and then using Uber Eats to deliver my food if there's demand?
Yeah, well, first of all, because you're in sort of a fixed location, right? But the biggest reason is the quality of the food. If you're an aspiring chef, you really want your food sitting cold in a bag in a car to deliver 15 or 20 minutes to somebody. Like that's the main thing. You want the quality of the food degrades pretty quickly when it's delivered, and only certain types of food deliver. But let's say you wanted to do something like, I don't know, you wanted to do an oyster bar. You're really going to do an oyster bar from a ghost kitchen and put them in a bag and send, like, that doesn't make sense. Same thing with steak, same thing with French fries. You know, there's some things that travel decently, but most stuff doesn't. Let's say you want to do a bonefish grill type concept and have grilled fish. Are you going to do that in a ghost kitchen and put it in the back of a car and drive it? You know, so the other thing is, and people don't realize this, is that the actual delivery cost from a ghost kitchen is a lot more expensive because you're going point to point. So let's say the ghost kitchen is in a fixed location. You have to drive to the ghost kitchen, pick up the stuff, and then drive, let's say it could be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or 20 minutes away. When you're mobile, just go point to point. Like the average drive time right now is only about 8 minutes. And it's coming down. The more density, the more the drive time comes down. And it's very, very different from delivering from a fixed location.
How's it going so far? I mean, you've rolled out in a couple of towns. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, it's going incredible. We're seeing unprecedented results. The net promoter score is something we've never seen before, like mid to high 70s. People absolutely love it. People are ordering, the repeat rates are off the charts. People are ordering like crazy. It's like a phenomenon in the areas that we're in. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't have imagined that it would be going this well. I thought people would be interested in it, but not to this extent.
Do you see this in every city, in every town? I want this in my town.
I do. And you know what? It's funny. I've never really been involved in a business where any single person I talk to says, why wouldn't I do that? I want that. Then you've got a big TAM. And that's what's exciting about this idea is you got a big TAM. Everyone wants it. But more importantly, it's very profitable. And so I've been involved in Jet and diapers and Walmart and Amazon and things where you're dealing with these razor thin, 2, 3, 4% operating margin is really good. You know what I mean? This has the opportunity for double digit operating margins or more. Like it's very profitable when you vertically integrate and the food only costs, 20 to 25% of the revenue. So it's exciting on TAM and it's exciting on the profit side as well.
Yeah, and also again, it's weird how COVID has changed kind of the mindset of startups like this, because let's say I have a restaurant idea and of course I'm thinking, what major city should I go to launch a restaurant? I'm not thinking that way anymore because hundreds of thousands of restaurants went out of business in the past 2 years in major cities. And so I have to be more flexible and more experimental about how I start up a restaurant, even if my idea is great. And it sounds like this is a perfect platform to even think about starting a restaurant within.
Absolutely. And like, there's no downside at all. Like a restaurant, again, the biggest risk is you make the real estate investment, you build a restaurant, your break even is $3 million of revenue and you're doing 2 and you're like, oh, if I can just get another $1 million, I make some money, but you can't and it closes down. This is much simpler. It's each truck can do $200,000 a year. So you do one truck, 200,000. Oh, it's 400,000, put a second truck. Oh, it's 600,000, put a third truck. Like you literally just match the CapEx with the demand. So by definition, you're going to be profitable. Like the math will work. You just need to be smart, have a good menu, and obviously the demand for your restaurant will depend on and order density will drive times. But we've seen some restaurants, even with low order density, that have high ticket size work really well and still be very profitable. So I do think this is the future of restaurants and restaurant chains. In the same way that, the future of retail was the actual goods coming to your door, this is the same. It's the future of restaurants is they come to you. I do think people socially, though, will still go out to restaurants. We're not taking away from people that want to just have a social evening out. But when it comes to like on a day-to-day basis, eating food, why would you not just want to have the restaurant?
It could also be an alternative model for a restaurant. So a restaurant could say, okay, on the one place where our location where people go to, on the other hand, we're a kitchen where we're going to use, Wonders food trucks to deliver our great food to people who don't want to go out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's high quality. The restaurants love it because the food quality stays. There's nothing worse than being like a proud chef and having a great restaurant and having people say, oh yeah, it didn't taste great. because it sat in the back of a courier car for 30 minutes. And that's very frustrating. This offers an alternative where the food's going to be super high quality because it's literally cooked right outside the customer's door.
So you're involved in so many things. I have to ask about the Minnesota Timberwolves. I know you are not taking ownership for a while now, but you recently bought them with your partners. And I always wonder, like, when someone buys a team like that, do you have to think to yourself, okay, this is how I can improve the team? They've been working on it for 50 years to improve this team, but I have my new ideas about how to improve it. Like, how do you visualize improving a team like that?
Yeah, I mean, sort of A-Rod and I, I bought it with A-Rod, we are approaching it the same way we would sort of a typical startup, which is apply the VCP framework. I've created Vision Capital People, and really going in and building the foundation day one. What is the vision? What do we want to be in 10 to 15 years? What is the strategy to get there? What's the right organizational structure to support that strategy? What's the culture we want to create? What is the mission of the organization? What are its values? What are the behaviors and traits we look for in people we hire? What's the capital plan? What do the projections look like? What's the pitch deck to basically pull all this together to get everyone fired up inside the organization and outside, that we've got a plan forward? Like, it's building that foundation. And we've been, since July, doing just that and going through the whole sort of foundational process. I believe most of the mistakes made, if not all the mistakes made, whether it be any organization, a team, a company, is to start making moves before you've done the hard foundational work. Like, how do you let somebody go and hire somebody if you don't know the culture and the type of people and the traits that you value and what's important to you? How do you build and hire someone when you don't know what the right organizational structure is? And you don't know what the right organizational structure is until you know what the strategy is. So it's these building blocks that you need to get in place first. And then everything just starts to roll so smoothly from there.
And so, like, let's say when I think of any team, basketball, baseball, football, and I see new owners come in, I always figure, okay, they're going to throw money at it to buy great players to win championships, which seems like, and to be frank, like an old model. And I'm just wondering what uses of, for instance, I haven't seen that much with kind of Moneyball style statistics or machine learning applied to basketball. You see it in baseball. It's harder in football. I imagine it's even harder in basketball. Like in baseball, you could say a player who walks a lot is more valuable than a player who hits a lot of home runs, and that changes the way you do drafting. But I wonder, what are you looking into this for basketball?
Yeah, I think there's a really big opportunity. I think, like you said, it's a little more nascent than it is in baseball, for example. But there's a really big opportunity, especially since you've got salary cap in basketball. It gets a lot harder, where you have only a certain amount of money you have to make sure each dollar you're getting the right amount of wins per dollar. Otherwise, the math doesn't add up and you're not going to win the number of games you hope for. So I actually think that analytics and this Moneyball concept could even be more valuable in basketball than some other sports.
Yeah, like, what kind of data have you already seen that surprised you, and what kind of data are you looking for?
I mean, nothing like specific. I think this is sort of still early days, but everything, like, it's not looking past just the box score. There's lots of things that are happening that don't get accounted for in the box score that need to get accounted for, whether it be on defense, where you are, like, positioned, how you box people out, how you set a pick and roll. Was it a contested shot? Was it an open shot that you made or missed? Like, there's all these details. Even the accuracy of shooting. People don't take enough shots for it to be statistically significant, and so you have to look at the arc and trajectory of the ball. How did it hit the rim? Did it go? Was it a swoosh? Like, what is the accuracy to try to make a determination of, like, how good of a shooter somebody is? Because, like, even if you flip the coin, we know it's 50-50 over the long term, but you can flip a coin thousands of times, 10,000 times, and you can land on 49% and 51. When you know it's 50-50, but you haven't had enough reps. Think about in basketball, you don't take that many shots to really figure out whether somebody, like, how good of a three-point shooter are they? And to really be able to figure that out when somebody only has, let's say 200 shots. Think about that. It's like a very hard problem, because if you're looking at straight percentage, you're going to get it wrong, because 200 shots could be off by 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points. Somebody could be shooting 33% from three when really they're a 40% shooter, or somebody could shoot 45 and really they're 38. Like there's a big variation. And so you have to figure out how do you correct for that with analytics by looking at like shots, the type of shots they take, like I said, the trajectory of the ball, the arc, where it lands into the basket, things like that, to try and suss out what their true shooting percentage is.
And I guess also, like, is, for instance, 3-point shots correlated with number of wins? Like, what's the importance of, should you shoot more? Should you aim for more 3-point shots or less 3-point shots? So are those players even valuable for winning more? You don't know.
No, that's it. No, that's all part of it too. It's figuring out, at the end of the day, you're trying to figure out what some players' contribution to wins is. At the end of the day, it's wins above replacement concept that you have, that everyone has been tracked pretty well in baseball for a long time now. It's pretty new in basketball, but I think it could be a lot better. I think there's a lot of upside to really getting, but it's more than just figuring out, like in baseball, you have so many discrete at bats that you can, in 1 year, you could have 600 at bats. You start statistically to be able to know like how good a player is because they've got so many discrete, at bats, and the at bats look the same for every player. In basketball, it's very different. I mean, you don't really have that same level of discrete shooting, right? It's like players could be, double teamed, they could be contested more, sometimes not. It's like there's and they're not taking nearly as many shots, not taking them from the same location. It's just much more complicated.
There's also like maybe feet run or yards run per game. So, some players might be great in the first 5 minutes that they're running around, but after a certain number of yards, they can't shoot anymore. And you don't know that either.
Yeah.
And
that's another factor. Yeah, that's another factor.
You're giving me so many ideas for startups that I'm going to build and then sell to you. This is great.
Great. Don't tell anyone. Build them.
Right. But one other question I have is, like, with the Timberwolves, if I buy a ticket, let's say I buy season tickets and it costs hypothetically $200, and then I sell it to a scalper for $400, a scalper sells it to someone for $500. The Timberwolves only make money when they sell to me. They don't make money off of the secondary and tertiary transactions that just happened. I wonder if you consider wrapping tickets in NFTs to keep track of the royalties on all secondary sales.
Yeah, well, we just, Alex and I just started a company called Jump, and it's basically a next gen sort of ticketing platform that we're going to test with the Timberwolves. And I don't want to give too much away, but it's something we're definitely thinking about. I think there's definitely a future, like next gen ticketing platform that I don't want to give too much away. There's an opportunity there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I always look at the crypto stuff and think, okay, when's there going to be real world use cases as opposed to crypto buying other crypto and back and forth and back and forth. And this seems to me like a multi-billion-dollar real world use case, something like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, and I guess finally, how do you have the energy to do all of these completely disparate things? Like, is everything fully delegated, or how involved are you every day?
No, I'm really involved in those things, but I love sleep because I think that gives you energy. So I get good 8 hours every day, work out, eat healthy. And if you've got 16 hours, non-sleeping hours in a day, if you're really efficient with your time and you outsource anything that's not pertaining to things that are really like these sort of big concepts, you have actually a lot of time in the day to do stuff. Most time, if you kind of like just mapped out your time, you're doing a lot of things that, could be outsourced or aren't that relevant, or, I don't spend any time, dwelling on the past. I don't spend time worrying about things. I don't, I'm just laser focused on the things that really matter. And I outsource anything that's sort of, like chores and anything that could be, could get in the way,
I wish I could outsource all my television watching. That would save me a lot of time.
Yeah.
So Marc Lore, thanks so much. You are always so creative and filled with ideas, and you're working on such amazing, interesting projects. We talked about 4 of them, from cities to vertical cars to basketball teams to a new model for restaurants. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and let's stay in touch as things happen. I'd love to see the next iteration. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was great talking to you. Great
Same here.
questions, James. Thank you. All right, see you.
Thank you.